1 week season.
Hey, and welcome in, OWS fam. So glad you are with us. We are back in the DFS lab. As always, this show presented by 1 week season, where we build a DraftKings lineup. Use that as a way to talk through the upcoming slate. In this case, it's week 16. You're watching this probably Friday, maybe Saturday, but we're airing it on Friday, December 20th, shortly after lunchtime, probably. And I'm your host, Cheeseman, and a privilege to welcome up Papy. And Papy, man, we texted about this just briefly because, obviously after building on this show, Roger stack last weekend, Sunday night rolled around, and I'm like, man, how did Papy do with? I know that he was playing this heavily. So how was your week 15? Yeah, man, because I know you had some of that Rodgers Devontae stack.
Yeah, I was all about Rodgers and Devontae, and I had it all through my lineups. And, I say you can never complain about a win, but, man, I want to complain this week about a win. It was a nice week for me. I mean, I made, like $6-7 grand. That's a good week. But I was in first place in the $100 spy at the end of the 1 o'clock. So I was winning about like $150K. And, even at the halftime of the 4 o'clocks, I was still up like $90K. And so, I'm just sitting here saying, can these games just chill? Can these games just chill? And of course, Connor has his best week of the season. Evans has his best week of the season. And the Lions-Bills game scores 90 points. And I'm just like, it's free. Like, you don't complain when you win. It's hard to win in DFS. But when I had the Rodgers-Adams stack everywhere, no one had it. And, it went off. I'm sitting here thinking, man, like I might have stuck it this week. And did win, good week, but was it close to being a huge week? And I tend to say, we've had most of my big wins from like week 15 on in DFS. I joke with my friends all the time, like I shouldn't even play until like week 15. But
I've thought that before. Yeah, that's interesting.
So good week, winning week, very, very close to being a huge week. I think I sent you the screenshot where my lineup was winning like 127K or something with. At the halftime of the 4 o'clocks or whatever. So, doesn't not a great run out, but hey, you take the wins, and good week overall.
Yeah, that's the so interesting part. It underscores why it's so difficult to win first in a tournament. You have to have so many things kind of go your way once you're kind of in that top 1%, because I don't was Connor or Evans highly owned? I don't think. Assuming they weren't too highly owned, but if they go off, someone has it, right? Someone always has those pieces, even if they're not highly owned. So you really like to win a tournament, like those kind of results are gonna hurt you. Like you can't do it if someone has Evans and their combination beats you.
Yeah, Connor was relatively highly owned, so that hurt. And then and Evans was like moderately owned. He wasn't low owned. And then the Lions Bills game, obviously people had those players because it was the highest total and it scored 90 points. So that one that ended up being the nuts was like basically stacking that game with Connor and Evans. In fact, I think you could have built an afternoon slate lineup that would have won the Millie Maker. So it happens that way sometimes, but I still felt good about the Rodgers and Adams stack. And actually the lineup we built on this podcast last week at the end of the 1 o'clocks was in the top 100 in the Millie Maker. And I played it, so I know that. Awesome. But so hey, like you take it, it's a win. It was a good week, but this close. Maybe it'll be this week.
This close, dude. Yeah. Well, dude, I mean, good work, like putting yourself in that position, and hopefully next time it does play out in your favor. But I definitely know how frustrating that can be. Okay, well, looking here at week 16, I'll pull up DraftKings. Ownership is not up yet on the site. We typically look at 1 week season and Roto Grinders, probably because people you have that 2-game Saturday slate. So I think some sites are still kind of not totally focused on that. Turn the page. You got to get ownership out for that as well. But before we start with this lineup, do you have, even though ownership isn't out yet, any thoughts on what ownership could be? Or I guess we haven't talked injuries yet either. So any major injury situations that stand out to you at this point? Obviously, the big one is Jahmyr Gibbs with Montgomery being out, but everyone's known that leading up to this point.
Yeah, this is an interesting week because there's not a standout total. I mean, there's a lot of games that are clustered around 48 points as a total. And so I think ownership will be spread out. But then the other thing is Gibbs, right? So, Gibbs, I think he's going to be the highest owned player on a main slate this year. I think he'll probably be in the 60% for higher stakes and probably in the 40% for lower stakes. And that might be conservative, that prediction. If you could make the case that he was a good play this week with Monty healthy, because he's 7,500 in a great matchup. Without Monty, it's like he should really probably be like 9,500. And it's hard to see paths for him to fail. He gets the passing game work. They run around the goal line. He's a really good player. And, a lot of the times you would say like, man,
he's fast.
I wish they would just get rid of Monty and let him play 90% of the snaps. If he plays 80+% of the snaps, which I think he will, it's tough to see him getting below 20 to 25 points as his floor. And like his upside is legitimately like 50. So how do you not play him? I mean, the only reason is ownership. Like he could get hurt. Anybody could get hurt, and if he gets hurt, then not having him could push you all the way to the top. I'll probably have one or two lineups where I don't play him. And I say that like, maybe I might just play him on 100%. It's really hard to not play Gibbs this week. And because this is DFS and I'm saying that, he'll probably find a way to fail. But, it's just hard to get away from Gibbs. So I think his ownership is interesting. And then I think what his ownership will do to the rest of the running backs, because there's other good running back plays. Like Connor's in a good spot. Robinson's in a good spot. Chase Brown, even though it's not a great matchup, has just had like an incredible role since Moss went down. You can argue that Jonathan Taylor's underpriced. You can argue that Cook is in a good spot. And then there's Barkley, who smashed the Commanders the last time he played them. And he's sort of a boomer bust player at his price because of the tush push and because of, he doesn't have a huge passing game role. But when he goes off, he tends to go off. So, he's a good play in my opinion too. So, there's other good running backs in good spots. So what is Gibbs like overwhelming ownership going to do to the rest of their ownership? And then I think the other thing that's going to be interesting about ownership this week is quarterback, because there's a lot of cheap quarterbacks that are coming in sort of off the bench. I mean, Penix, Rudolph, Rudolph at Christmas, right? It's like the red-nosed Rudolph. He's got to have a big week.
Hey, man.
So I think Richardson is really cheap. There's a lot of like cheap QBs who are in good spots too. So what's ownership going to be like on those guys? It's a tough week, in my opinion, to predict ownership. And I haven't seen a lot of ownership projections. Maybe it's because they're shaking in their boots. They don't want to be way off, but it's a tough week, in my opinion, for ownership projections.
Yeah, I agree. And I love kind of just the way your approach there, or kind of the thought that with Gibbs getting so much attention, I mean, he's just getting so much attention. Like every show more or less is going to have the same conversation about how good of a play he is. Some people will give their case for why to fade him, but he's just the mind share of Jahmyr Gibbs is so huge that guys like Saquon Barkley people will be thinking about them less. But, we've seen Saquon put up, scores of, 36, 30, a couple of 36.3, 4 36 point. That's crazy. 4 36-point games, 1 49-point game. And he just is probably going to be the forgotten man. And I will say, as I'm thinking about it, the knocks against Gibbs for me, and again, he's still probably the smartest just to lock him and just move on, make decisions elsewhere. But the knocks on him to me would be will Chicago just on Monday night, Chicago just ran the ball way more than expected. They didn't Caleb Williams had 6 throws at halftime. So maybe Chicago will just try to run and shorten the game. And then maybe Gibbs won't get the touchdowns, or maybe he'll only get 1 touchdown and 100 yards and a touchdown, which is still a fine score. But if Saquon got 40, then that's where you could see, the leverage come into play. But all that to say, Gibbs is still a great play. And I like how kind of you kind of put that in perspective. So cool, man. Anything else before you want to just jump into this build?
No, it's a great time to be playing DFS. It's snowing here in Pittsburgh. It's Christmas. I mean,
Is it?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it's hopefully we get a white Christmas. Best balls going on. I got the 6 teams through the semis in DK best ball, 4 teams through in the big board, 2 teams through on underdog in the best ball mania, which was a little disappointing because I had 5 teams get second place in their pod in underdog. But again, you never complain about success, even if it could have been better. So hopefully I can get my 3rd year in a row with a team through to the finals in underdog, or at least if not there, get one through on DK or the big board. So yeah, it's great, man. It's the most fun time of the year.
It absolutely is, man. And a white Christmas would make it that much more festive, along with a couple of wins as well. Okay, what do you want to start with this build? You want to look at your primary stack first, or go a different direction?
Now let's start with the running backs because we just talked about them, and let's go ahead and put in Gibbs. All right, okay, woohoo, big secret. We're gonna put in Gibbs.
Not sneaking up on anyone.
He's not sneaking up on anyone, but we're gonna do it. And for this build, we're gonna go ahead and put in Barkley there with him. So. We're gonna play them both here, and obviously that's a big chunk of our salary. But I don't think a lot of people are gonna do this, and I think that Barkley is gonna probably be very underowned for his upside because he has coming off a streak of 3 games that have been a little bit below expectations, including that head scratcher against the Panthers. And I think everyone's going to play Gibbs, and so they're not going to want to cram in Barkley with him. So we're going to go ahead and cram and say that these guys could both potentially score 40. All right, so now we've used a lot of our salary. Let's go to our primary salary saver. It's going to be a tight end, and we're going to go ahead and put in Strange from the Jaguars, who he's questionable, but he's got an AC sprain, and they're saying he's fine. So, he should
shoulder.
Yes. And this, to me, there's not a lot of value on this slate. And so I think he's the most obvious value. He saw 12 targets last week. It's not that fluky because he was seeing that at least moderate volume before when he was filling in for Ingram. And the Jaguars offense is just a tight end centric offense. They use the tight end a lot. Mac Jones is a tight end centric quarterback. And the other receivers other than Thomas are hurt. So from a lot of angles, he makes sense that he could see another, 8 to 10 targets. And at 3,500 in a great matchup, that's to me a pretty easy place to go to save salary.
I like that. I like that a lot.
All right. Next place we're going to go, let's go ahead and put in our defense, and we're going to go with the Colts defense. And that's sort of their 3K, sort of a moderately priced defense, but we're basically going to say here they're at home. They've actually been pretty good. If you click on their box score, no one really talks about the Colts defense. The Colts defense has been a decent fantasy defense. I mean, you can see they're actually been pretty solid. Overall, and
there's some upside as well. They've had a couple of 10-plus point defensive outputs.
Yeah, they've also seen in their last 5 games, right? They've seen Buffalo, they've seen Detroit. They've seen some good offenses.
Wow, yeah, that's true.
And they still hung in there against some of those good offenses, and now they're at home against a terrible offense.
I like that.
Mason Rudolph, I can tell you because I've met him personally. Actually,
really.
On the pickleball court of anywhere, the place that I play, the Steelers would come play in the off season. And first of all, he's a giant, but let me just tell you, Mason Rudolph, and I mean this in the nicest possible way because he's a nice guy, but not the sharpest knife in the drawer. And he probably it shouldn't really be an NFL starting quarterback in my opinion. I think maybe Levis is just that bad. So. Coming off the bench with Rudolph, I know it's his time of the year, but we're gonna go ahead and try to pick on him here with the Colts at home. And now we're looking at this. We got our salary savers in there, right? We don't have any of our receivers in there. Now we're gonna go ahead and put in one of our cheap receivers, or cheaper than he should be, in my opinion, and that's DK Metcalf.
Okay. Yep. Metcalf, got Seattle at home against Minnesota. He's pretty cheap, and obviously, he has that profile as kind of the deep threat.
Mm-hmm. So 5,500 for him is just the cheapest I really remember him in recent memory.
Sure.
If you look at his price, he dropped 500 just from last week. And earlier in the season, he was 7K. We all remember, best ball fantasy drafts, he was going second or third round. So, he's just cheap, and I think he might be finally fully healthy. You can see the injury designation finally went away. If you look at his snap rates, he played over 90% of the snaps last week. In the previous 3 weeks, he played like 75% of the snaps. So it seems like maybe he finally just got healthy. Minnesota obviously has a great defense, but the one place Minnesota has been vulnerable is to wide receiver ones. And I just think he has a lot of upside for his price, and that for a player who was priced much higher for most of the year, I'll go ahead and take that discount and say, like, if he gets deep, which he can do, he's going to be a steal at that moderate price.
Absolutely. Absolutely love it.
All right, let's go ahead and build our stack now, and save this one because I think it's an interesting stack. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to put in Penix, put him in there, get Penix in there. Now, this is a play where I'm really going to be interested in ownership here, because I think he's going to be very underowned. I think this is going to be a situation where people want to see it first. And we know that when people want to see it first, they don't tend to play guys. And I think also because there's a lot of other cheap QB options, kind of some of the other ones that we talked about. That's another reason which people won't feel like, oh my God, he's 4,500. I just have to play him. So with Penix, this is interesting. I don't know what he's going to look like. I'd be lying to you if I said I did. And anybody who tells you they know what Penix is going to look like this week, don't trust them. They don't know.
Yeah.
But what I will say is the Falcons are not out of the race for the playoffs. They are still very much so in the division race. And while Cousins has not been great over the last 5 games, they did win last week. And so we know that the way NFL works, where when a QB wins, we kind of justify all of his other ills. And so for them to have $100 million QB that they just brought in Cousins, and for him to be coming off a win and them to be right in the heart of a division race, Penix must be showing them something in practice. He must. They have to think he is their best chance to win right now. This is not a, hey, we're just going to put him in there because we want to get him some reps for next year. Like, they have to think he can play. And so
that's a great point.
I'm going to use that sort of as my barometer to say, like, if they are seeing something in practice where they think he's their best chance to win right now, then for 4,500 in a great matchup against the Giants, who defense is terrible in all regards, I'm gonna trust that and basically go with it at 4,500. And then the other part of it is that if you look at what type of player he was in college, he was a big-armed gunslinger that liked to throw the ball down the field, and that's sort of what we want in DFS, right? Somebody who wants to get the ball down the field. And so, it's speculative, but I've lost before and I'm not afraid to lose again. And, you have to ask yourself what do you win when you're right? And I think Penix is a classic play of that question. What do you win when you're right? And if you're right, and if he has a good game and no one plays him because they haven't seen it yet, he could win you a lot of money this week, I think.
Absolutely, dude. Yeah, great job. Just appreciate you breaking that down in that way. Just especially given, the fact that Atlanta still is in the playoff race. This is not one of those situations where it's like, season's over, throw the rookie in and see what we got here. They're, there's a lot on the line. So I love that play. And so with that, who are you going to stack him with here?
We're stacking him with Mooney. And the reason we're going with Mooney over London is, number one, he'll be lower owned. He's a little bit cheaper. But the real reason is because, like I said about Penix's profile of being sort of the gunslinger who wants to go down the field, Mooney has been that guy for Atlanta this year. I mean, London has been the intermediate short route kind of guy. The down the field guy has been Mooney. He had a dud last week. He only had 1 catch. And so I think that people will look at that and sort of not see a reason to play him this week, especially with the uncertainty around Penix. And he still played 91% of the snaps last week. And so it's not as if he's not on the field. I think that if Penix has a big game, it's probably because he's hitting on bombs, and I think those bombs could go to Mooney. So that's why I prefer Mooney to Penix.
Love it, dude. And got actually a decent amount of salary left here, even with the two high-priced running backs. So I'm interested to see what you do next.
So we're going to go ahead and play our bring back in that game. We're going to play Neighbors. And Neighbors finally saw that injury designation go away. And I played Neighbors last week a decent amount. And so now without that injury designation, we're gonna play him again. I mean, they just feed him the rock. I mean, it's like just they do. I mean, it's almost like there's nobody else out there. And you know, he had one of his better weeks last week. He hasn't really had that blow up week yet, but that's because his quarterback play isn't great. He is a great player. I mean, he makes a lot of great plays. In fact, I feel badly that I said that he probably wasn't quite in the class of Marvin Harrison Jr. coming out of the draft. I thought Marvin Harrison was a little bit above him. That probably was incorrect. I think Neighbors is maybe the better player there, or certainly equal. He's really a great player. And so again, he's got a great matchup. Atlanta can't get any pressure on the quarterback because they drafted Penix and not a pass rusher, right? So, yeah. I mean, that's what everyone was getting on him for. I mean, because they were kind of just saying like, you know, hey, you guys can't get any pressure on the passer, and you took Penix over an elite edge, so they still can't get any pressure. And I think that the New York Atlanta game is sort of a game where I see two great passing game matchups, and I don't think anyone's going to really be on it. And in a week where there's not a clear, like, okay, well, this game is just a clear, great game environment. I like the Bengals Cleveland game environment, and I've seen people say that's like the game environment of the week, sort of, is that one. But without Jameis Winston, I think people are overestimating that game environment just a little bit, because the Cleveland defense is good. It's a division game.
Yes, game.
And Jameis Winston really drove those game environments. And Dorian Thompson-Robinson is not Jameis Winston. There's going to be a lot more running.
Decidedly so.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot. They're probably going to go read option heavy, short pass heavy. And so I think that game environment's getting a little bit overrated. And I think the Giants Atlanta game environment is the one, to me, where I don't think people are on it, and it could be good.
Yep, absolutely. I'm not going to disagree. That's yeah, man. I'm liking this build an awful lot. All right, 6,200 left. Where do we go?
Go to our flex. You can maybe guess who I'm going to play here. It's Trey. And
I get a touchdown, man.
He has to score eventually. I don't know how many times I've said it. He has to score eventually. Like, the law of averages has to even out. I mean, if you look at his box scores recently, I think in the last 4 games he's had over 10 targets every game. He's averaging, like 10 catches for 90 yards, and he just never scores. And they even tried to get him a touchdown last week. They gave him a designed goal line play and a target from the 2, and he got tackled at the 1. It's incredible. And believe me, I know that because I'm watching this with all this money on the line, and I don't want James Conner to score. And so I'm like, James Conner is going to score. And then I see this. I'm like, no, they're going to get it to McBride. And then he gets tackled on the 1. I'm like, of course. Now,
and then you know what's going to happen next at the 1.
Of course, Conner waltzed in from the 1. So, I'm watching this thinking to myself, like, they really tried to get him a touchdown. I mean, it was like a designed little shuttle to get him the ball in the 2, and he still doesn't manage to score. So it has to happen eventually. I think they are actually trying to get him a touchdown. I think they know it's ridiculous, and they're trying to get him a touchdown. If he scores, he's gonna have a really good game. Like, yeah. He's getting incredible target volume. He's a great player. He's making use of it. He's racking up yards. He's racking up catches. He just doesn't score. And that's variance. Believe that it's variance. Trust that it's variance. I know it's painful, but trust that it's variance. And he gets the Panthers, who have been absolutely whacked by tight ends. I think they're 30th in DVOA against tight ends, so it's a great matchup. And the one nice thing about his usage is that he hasn't really been priced up because he's not scoring. And so, even if his drought continues, like if he gets 10 catches for 90 yards, which is basically what he's been averaging over the last 4 weeks, that's still 19 points on 6.2K salary. Like, you're not horribly upset about that. You'd like more, but it's not awful. And so I think that his floor is pretty safe. And my goodness, if he just has that 3 touchdown game and the law of averages swings back in his favor, then he's going to break the slate. So I'm going to keep just trusting in that TDs are fluky and it's coming.
Yeah, man, imagine that 3 touchdown game. That would be just nuclear, absolutely extraterrestrial score right there. Yeah, man, currently has fewer receiving touchdowns on the year than Jared Goff. So let that sink in. Pappy, great stuff as always, man. Let's final look at the lineup that we built for those listening on the pod. Penix Jr. at the quarterback, Gibbs and Barkley, so the double stack with the 2 expensive running backs, and then Metcalf, Mooney, Malik Neighbors, Brenton Strange, Trey McBride, and the Colts defense. So yeah, great stuff, Pappy. Anything else you want to add before we ship this one?
No, it's like I said, it's the best time of the year. It's the holidays. Happy holidays to the OWS family. I hope you guys all have a great one.
Same.
And hope you get the Christmas present of a big DFS win.
That's right, guys. Absolutely. Guys, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. Pappy, thanks for your time as always, and we will catch you next week.